Today's world of accounting and finance.
To me, the biggest thing is going to be what is all the new,
How has AI affected, sort of the business, your business?
what's going to be the project scope and the project listening of.
Today's episode is sponsored by TaiPi. TaiPi revolutionizes enterprise application development, turning business ideas into robust, data, and AI-driven solutions. With TaiPi's drag-and-drop features providing intuitive user interfaces coupled with what-if scenario capabilities, TaiPi empowers business analysts to make insightful decisions that are fundamental to drive today's dynamic business.
So today I have Eric Van Cleve, corporate controller of 8x8. He has over 20 years of experience in accounting, leading teams, and overseeing key financial operations, including SEC reporting, audits, cost optimization, and scaling businesses from startups to established enterprises. With a strong background in IT infrastructure, software development, and automation, Eric integrates technology into financial processes to enhance efficiency and streamline operations. Throughout his career, Eric has successfully led major initiatives such as improving financial close processes, executing cost reduction strategies, integrating multi-billion-dollar acquisitions, and establishing scalable accounting structures. He has extensive experience in international finance, consolidations, and setting up shared service centers to support global businesses. As a CPA and MBA, Eric has worked closely with auditors, public accounting firms, and finance professionals to ensure compliance and operational excellence. And outside of work, he enjoys flying planes, sailing, golfing, racing. Eric is truly a dedicated professional and strategic leader, and he is very much results-driven approach to financial management and business growth. And most recently, as I mentioned, he is the corporate controller of 8x8. 8x8 is a NASDAQ company, call sign EGHT, connects people and organizations through seamless communications on industry's most integrated platform for customer experience, combining contact center, unified communications, and CPaaS APIs or communications platforms and service. So welcome, Eric. Thank you for being here with me today. It's great to have you. I understand that you are a pilot. That's what you do on your off times.
Yeah, so it's fun to get up in the air and fly around, did a crossover through Bravo space to San Francisco and go down the coast, Half Moon Bay. It's a beautiful view if anybody has a chance to do it. The local airports have Discovery flights as well, in case anybody's interested in hopping up there.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Well, thanks for being here with us. And, as a controller of 8x8 and in today's world of accounting and finance, especially now with AI, what are some of the challenges you're experiencing in regards to utilizing AI in the close process? Or how have you implemented some of that, into your processes today, or do you intend to do so in the near future?
Yeah, so I think the way to do it is to adopt AI where and when possible. Generally the human element and review is very important. To me, the biggest thing is going to be what is all the new kids that are coming out of college going to be learning. You're going to be able to train them properly. The biggest factor is that you need to know what the right answer is, right? And the biggest way to do that is to be able to get, training, learning, working with the key, people in strategic roles that can actually train them and groom them to be able to know what that right answer is supposed to be, right? And if you think about it, it's interesting if you look back in history, because, if you look back when the computer was created, right, before IBM had this massive supercomputer to do what, you can do in a laptop today, right? And then you look at, the internet, right, before, when you could send an email in seconds, right? What was the next iteration of, right? You can run Amazon and huge businesses based on the internet. So the next iteration is AI, right? And then that capability is not going to be how are they going to replace humans? It's going to be, well, how do we become more efficient overall? And when we become more efficient overall, what's going to happen is, you know, you're going to be able to get from a V0 to a V1 document in, no time at all, right? And a thoughtfully written or prepared or calculated, right? So when you do all of that, then the question becomes, but it won't have all the interconnections that you may need between um, different accounting programs, and, you wouldn't be able to stitch Salesforce to NetSuite and all of that, right? You basically have every system today is essentially leveraging what they can do in their own right. And then what you should have is AI agent, which will then be able to help be able to stitch across multiple applications to be able to do all of that. So to me, the biggest factor in being able to automate and make things faster is going to be, leveraging AI where, you can save time, right? And the biggest thing to come to grips with is that AI is here. It's going to stay, and it's going to make all of our lives easier and better, right? It's not necessarily a replacement tool. It's more to, you know, make the most of the productivity that somebody can in any particular day.
What are some applications where you may have applied AI within your own like ERP system or even in data document processing? Have you used any AI in those areas like flux analysis or other areas that interact with the ERP by chance?
Yes, I have. Yeah. So AI is a very good tool. What it can do is that it can actually, search through all the memo descriptions that you've written through your ERP and your transactional information. And it can help summarize the movement on, G&A. I mean, you think of what a 10Q and a 10K actually has as MD&A, but the level of detail that, you're diving into is much more comprehensive, because then you can grab your ERP for the accounts that roll up to those individual line items that ultimately show up on your reporting schedules, right? In the filings. And there you're going to have deep descriptions of, the nature of the activities that are there. So you can get a more accurate picture of what's actually showing up, within those. Or if there's any problem areas, you can address them early on as opposed to, as you go through the reporting process and figure things out. So you get information much faster.
Is there a particular software program that you use to kind of help you interact, with your internal data to extract, information?
Right now there's a lot of players that are, out there trying to get, in, right? Like some, there's Glean AI, right? There's, who's trying to go at it, right? I mean, you've got Chat GPT, right? I mean, every software seems to be adding some level of capability of AI, right? Like IntelliGeyes, right? They've got, AI, and a handful of others where, they're being able to go through all of the, research that's necessary and be able to, carve out, the ability to come up with these, documentation, right? I mean, the biggest thing is like, if you think about like Chat GPT as an example, right? You can load whatever data that you want in there and it'll parse and it'll give you a summary of what's there. So in some ways, if you think about it, right, you've got, Chat GPT is kind of like the DOS, right? Like the bare bones, the base, the calculation, how to be able to process all that data, right? When you've got these big players like Microsoft, Amazon, all running through NVIDIA to be able to make this thing work, right? But but when you look at the big, these large language models and how they, are able to pull it off, right? The biggest factor is who's going to build something that can sit on top of all of that, right? And then make it very meaningful, right? I think that's still kind of the cutting edge and what, on the horizon for us to learn about. And if I think 5 years down the road, right, how there's autonomous cars and all these other things, right? Great GPTs. It's only probably a matter of time before we've got GPTs creating GPTs, and then we have autonomous AI where, you can start, interacting with it faster and more capably.
Yeah, makes sense. In terms of your staff, how do you get them become more aware of, AI's capabilities and training them on tools that may be out there? And I guess maybe just general awareness around what tools might be out there and how those can be leveraged for their own jobs.
Yeah. So I think the mentoring of the new details, right? So in some ways, the kids that are coming from, college, they've had some basic skills, but academia a little interesting in that, they they don't want you to plagiarize, so they don't, in some ways there's a discouragement to leverage, a lot of these tools. So, once they're coming out, it's kind of a different, you kind of like flip the switch and then you want them to go from, where they're not using it to, kind of putting it on steroids, right? Where, you can then get business process and automation faster. So to me, the biggest factor is, what are going to be the scenarios where, there's gaps and there's white space between a process that, you can get a different, additional information from, right? So it's not just information gathering like big data. It's where can you gather, meaningful insight into running a process and how you can, change, and update, that automation. So to me, the people who've been, they've been in the industry for, 20 to 40 years. I think they're really the ones who are going to be ushering in, the new era, for AI. I think what's going to happen is, you have a couple of disruptors that, very energetic, entrepreneurs that want to go ahead and make a name for themselves. But if you're working in a corporate office, such as, this one or others, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with individuals that, want to work hard and want to do a good job. And, in some ways they're going to be, they're going to have the systems that the corporation has already, identified as, working with. And so in some ways, what you'll want to do is be able to get very good and skilled, within those particular, you know, things, applications, right. That are, within an organization already. Right. And by doing that, right, you'll have the ability to understand them, how to use them. I was just reading Vanderbilt has a program for AI prompting, right? They created a class for it. So, if they're creating AI prompting, which doesn't sound very fancy, it's almost like professional Googling in some ways. But if you have the ability to be able to put that in there, right, and it's going to be meaningful, those would be the way that you'll be able to make sure that everything gets stitched together properly.
I think I saw that Vanderbilt, just down the street from me here in Nashville, right? How has AI affected, sort of the business, your business as a whole, 8 by 8, CX, interaction with customers and brands, call centers, et cetera? Any insight, that you could share with how AI has affected the business as a whole?
Of course, yeah. But the whole CX journey is one where, 8 by 8 has a very interesting platform, right? It's got, it has UC, right, which is going to be your web and your chat, right? And then it'll have a contact center where you have the ability to do business to business capability and where you are able to interact, with all of your customers through the platform, right? And we also have CPaaS where, it's all of your data interactions, right? So you can have API or messaging apps, right? And do all the data integration, within the platform itself. And, the way that AI really helps, one thing that helps me in my daily life is, right, I get a summarization of exactly what took place within the meeting. Like after any discussion, any recorded discussion will give me a summary. It'll give me a list of action items. So nobody's there having to take notes, right? It's always a good idea to take notes, but you don't have to because it gives you a list of all the activities at the very end, and then it'll give you, a summary of what took place. Or just as an example, UC side, right? As far as like, but what it really does is it gives you an opportunity to enhance any conversation that's actually any interaction that's taking place, right? Meaningfully, understanding when you're in a sales motion with a customer, you have the ability to start getting some insight and some information, right? You have the ability to start, learning about, are you doing a support call and being able to manage, your interactions with those customers. It really becomes a platform that, allows the the call center and the contact center to become, much more capable in terms of all of the insights that they're gathering from their customers in real time. So it's very, very helpful to be able to glean all this information.
Okay, so you're using AI to help, the efficiency of the call center. Yeah, okay.
Right. And, just imagine, any, all the So when I think about, the CX journey as well, right? You're going to have some people who are on-prem, right? But as 8x8 is a cloud-based solution and a complete cloud solution, you have the ability to be able to go from, basically being on-premise to in the cloud and removing all the data infrastructure that, would have been part of that original setup. So lots of flexibility and ability to really deliver results, for the business through a contact center. And you don't always think that that's mainly like the largest driver of business, but when all of your, if your salespeople are using it, right, and your support center is using it, right, those are your customer touch points, and that's where you can really deliver value, right, on a business to business, use case.
On the revenue accounting side and deal structuring, what can you share with our listeners on how that model works for you at 8x8 in terms of what models you have and what challenges you face around rev rec?
So maybe I'll be a little bit more general in my response, on this one if that works for you. But basically, 8x8 is a SaaS model company similar to Salesforce and the other types of companies that are out there. So obviously, when you have a longer term subscription, right, it's a situation where typically the revenue model is over a period of years, right? So you have remaining performance obligations and other activities that the company will enter into on a contractual basis. But at a high level, just in compliance with ASC 606, typically you'd have an amortization and a waterfall of the revenue that would occur over the contract period.
Okay, that sounds pretty standard, pretty normal stuff. In terms of cost management, on the P&L side, are there tools that the company's evaluating or looking at in terms of cost reduction by leveraging, AI in any particular areas by chance?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing, the question that typically comes up is, where can you get the most efficiency, right, out of any particular process? And so, generally, you map the process, you lay it out, see where the pieces are that can get a faster review over particular items, right? I mean, just as an example, if you're entering into, say, like a new area of if you're entering into a new area of business operation, right? Some of the key characteristics that are going to come up are, you know, what are the main factors that are going to occur in a particular area, right? And you go through the process of, well, I need to kick this off. So who are going to be the right people to start working on it, right? What's going to be the project scope and the project listing of all the activities that are going to take place. So again, this is a story of going from, V0 to V1, right? And be able to pull all the pieces together to be able to run with this, right? And then having it kind of blessed by, the people who have lots of experience, and then filling it in with, all the actual, activities that need to be tailored to make it more specific. So, to me, when you're looking at then, you're looking at your software applications and how details are being done, right? The processing volumes that you look at isn't necessarily going to be in, how much data am I generating, or how fast that I'm going on a regular basis. It's going to be more around, what are the insights that I can gather, out of the process to be able to make, faster decisions, right? Would I be able to use it, say, to be able to prepare journal entries, right? The answer would be yes, you can, but then your data input need to be clean, and then your data outputs need to be clean, right? And then if you build a process around that, you're going to have to be able to then say, well, is it an ITAC, right? Where, you've got it as like a single repeatable process built on systems, right? Or is it, something where, I'm going to have, or is it something where there's human intervention where I'm going to need to be able to have it sort of reviewed and, scrubbed and go through all the details at the end, right? So ultimately, if I simplify it and just talk about like an AP, invoice processing, right? Like right now they have, if I compare what, RPA is doing as it compared to, AI, right? I mean, you had OCR originally, and that was, a major advancement where you'd be able to see like what an invoice is and just be able to scrape a PO number off the front of a PDF, right? That was like, and then it went to, the next step where you kind of have like the AR overlay and you're able to train it even further, right? Get a little bit more automation. Now what you do is you're able to, they can contextualize the entire front of the invoice, and then they can basically grab all the data elements that are sitting in there, and then they'd be able to, shuffle it into the right category for when they're entering it, right? So if you think about the structure of data is really where it comes from, right? Because you would have started with, structured data where, you have the OCR, it had to be in the right spot. Maybe you did like an image, it's always in the same pixels every time that vendor sent an invoice because it'll change your template, right? Then, you kind of go to, RPA where then you're able to string a process together. And now you've got AI where AI is, then able to say, well, now I know all of these fields. Like it doesn't have to be in this upper right-hand box. Like I could search for the invoice number anywhere on the page and then be able to just have that linked up specifically within the system. Right. And so that's where you get a lot of benefit additionally. Right. And it mostly just comes down to like processing volume. Right. Because if I have, OCR that does 30 to 40%, and then when I layer RPA and I get to 70 to 75%, and then I add AI, onto the process, it's more going to be, almost like 90%. So the error rate, as a result of that is getting much smaller. So the human intervention is mostly, on an exception basis as opposed to a primary processing basis, right? Which saves a significant amount of effort and time on, repeatable and routine processes. So, I think the best thing to do is, I think ChatGPT, Glean, I think they help a lot more with unstructured data, right? Where you're trying to piece together a myriad of pieces because it relies on, large language models and these training databases where, they've got, probably the entire, accounting database from FASB loaded in there. So they tend to know what the right answer is, but it doesn't mean it's foolproof. It doesn't mean they can't make a calculation error, right? So you need to review and own that because you can't just say, well, AI did it, right? You have to be able to represent that you're still comfortable with everything and the CFO and the CEO still sign off on the financials at the end of the day.
Yeah, you don't necessarily want to input your company proprietary data into ChatGPT either, right? So, how do you manage that sort of the four walls of what you want to get out of ChatGPT when it's kind of company specific?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess there's ChatGPT is something that is both public and private, right? So you have the ability to be able to put your data in it, right? And it's not trained off of it, right? So there can be walls that are set between that, right? Because you'll have the public forum of it, which is capable and able to run through a lot of the capabilities that it has, right? And all of the data that you stick in there is going to be trained, but there are ways to be able to secure the data so that you get the large capability with all the training that's happening, but the data that you insert, which is confidential, which is not available for everybody, can still be, properly managed and maintained.
I see. That sounds effective. In the bio, we talked a little bit about offshoring experience and developing centers for excellence or offshore centers that perform operational activities. Can you share with the group some of your experience in offshoring and how that's and what are some of the key success factors in making offshoring work?
Yeah. So the biggest factors of offshoring is right. So if I'm sitting at my desk and I've got somebody right next to me, it's pretty easy to have a daily conversation about the different activities that we've got. Right. So first and foremost, it's how do you remain connected with the team that's going to be potentially 12 hours away on the other side of the world. Right. So basically, what it comes down to is building reliable process. Right. It also comes down to do you define the accounting organization as one that is a controllership based, or do you define it as a, one that is more like functional in its nature, right? Where you define, where you may end up with a director by fixed assets or AR, AP, right? Whatever the case may be in those particular areas. Or is a controllership where, you've got it sort of top down from, AR and AP and everything rolling up, you know, individually through accounting managers as a result, right? And what's the level of the structure that you're dealing with, right? So, ultimately in a functional group, right, you typically have global processes, right? And process owners that, sit within each one of those buckets, especially as an organization is going to get big enough to be able to take advantage of a shared service where, your involvement in the US or high cost areas like UK or other areas, right? Then you'll want to be able to start, offshoring and taking advantage of some of those organizational efficiencies. But when you do that, the biggest thing that you'll want to consider is not just what is the cost, but also how is this structure going to help accelerate my day, right? So the biggest factor that you're going to glean from it is when you start offshoring, you're going to want to be able to pick up, a 24-hour day, right? Like right? If I'm in the US and I want to give people work-life balance, it means I'm working with an 8-hour day, right? And similar to ChatGPT and RPA and all these bots that you could run all day long, they have a 24-hour day, right? So the question to me would be, if I need to have 12 people in a staff, why not have 4 of them in Asia Pac, 4 of them in UK, and then 4 of them in the US? And the benefit that I would get from that is if they're all in the US, that's really great, but then I'm basically 9 until 6, right? Where you would expect their normal time. Although, accounting professionals, we all know that we kind of work outside of those hours. I think that the days of 9 to 5 are gone. But all being said as an example, right? So then, you basically have your Asia Pac because they start the day first on a global basis, right? Start them working off, close your sub ledgers, right? Day one, right? Then, then it shifts over to your EMEA region. Your EMEA region will then be able to get, the fixed asset depreciation because AP was a plugin for that, right? And then AP was also a plugin for prepaid. So you can have EMEA do your amortization that's over there, right? So you start to think, well, what's the next step, right? After you do that, as far as like a closed process is concerned, right? And then when it comes to the US, they've already processed all the accruals. They've already done the grant amortization, stock comp, right? They've already done all the payroll entries. They've looked at all the accruals that need to take place, right? And you look at the entire financial set of data, and then it comes to the US where, you've got your modules closed and you've already done all your depreciation and prepaid. Technically, you could call it that you've already spent 3 days on it, but it's only happened in one because you're not, right? If there's a US, right? All your subledgers would be closed day 1, right? And then EMEA would be day 2, and then US would be day 3, right? But because you've structured in such a way, you've taken advantage of a close day that, basically you've got 24 hours and the US comes in at the end of your day 1. And then you basically review everything and see if there's anything else that you need to send through the cycle. And then, the next day you just get all your recons complete and see if there's any adjustments that have to happen as a result of that. So basically by 2 days, you've got a complete set of numbers that, are reasonably reliable, right? And then at the end of day 2, you simply run your allocations and you're done, right? There's lots that go into that for sure, right? Because, there's revenue folks, then there's cost of sales folks, right? There's manufacturing, there's shipping, there's all types of things that typically take place. Then all those accruals need to happen. So the best part about it is, when you're reporting, everything just needs to be, fairly presented and reasonable, right? No material misstatements that are taking place in the financials. So when you pull all of that together, you can get some efficiencies, right, to be able to do that, right? And I think even in audit and SOX, right, you're supposed to evaluate the cost benefit of, the control environment that you have, right? Because, in all of these cases, right, you just want to be able to make sure that your financials are as accurate as you possibly can get them, right? And be able to report on them. So that way the investment community can rely on your financial statements as a whole, which is very important. So, but fundamentally,
Are there any locations that have worked out well for you in EMEA or APJ or India specifically that have had shared services centers that work well for you?
yeah. So you know, I think it just depends on, where it needs. I always like, interacting with, India, even though the time zone is completely opposite to California. But if you're in New York, it's not as bad, right? They do have a high level of capability there, right? And they do have talent. You have to search for it a little bit longer at times. But I think if you can hire, right, you hire at the top, so that way you have a local manager, director, right, who can manage the accounting operations locally for you, right? Then you're going to get your better. Then you're going to have better results, right? Because if you try to independently manage staff there, from the US, right, you're going to end up in a situation where you don't have the proper control or proper oversight, over their activities to ensure that the delivery is happening, right? You're going to find yourself frustrated because not all the activities are getting done as you would wish them, and any clarifications is an overnight issue as opposed to somebody who can mentor them locally. So, and the cost profile of that structure is not all that higher than if you were, just hiring independently there, just because the cost profile is so much better, especially in India. You look at the Philippines, you look at, Romania, you look at, all these different areas, right? These are typically like your lower cost areas, right? Your higher cost areas are, UK, Western Europe, right? And, but, Singapore is also going to be a good spot that you can leverage for, your general accounting, right? That you want to make sure is, properly performed as well, right? And these are the areas that you typically are a little bit higher cost, but, right, you do get, a little bit better value at the same time for what you're paying for. So,
You're talking about basically having all about kind of manage the local staffs and help. That really seems to have helped you, and especially.
and the other thing is when you're hiring into some of these additional regions, what typically takes place is that you can end up with 3 shifts within a day as well, right? So even if you want to have somebody who's working US hours, right, you can have them on first shift, second shift, third shift, and then you have 24-hour coverage anyway, right? I mean, you look at an accounting structure, and if you just want to be able to have a 24-hour day, similar to what I was referring to when, you just use the regions to your advantage, right? With maybe higher caliber people, right? If you want to use a shared service center for processing volumes, right? Then, you can also just do a 24-hour time clock for there as well, because there are people who are willing to work overnight in those areas, but they've been doing it for so long, it doesn't affect them. They're used to it, right? So, you obviously have to find the people who are willing to do that. The turnover is a little higher, of course, but if you have enough of a staff, you can still be able to manage it in this way, right? Otherwise, just fit it into the regional structure where you take advantage of a 24-hour time clock.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Let's switch gears a little bit with on M&A. It looks like you have quite a bit of experience on M&A, worked with companies that are acquisitive. When it comes to integrations, the acquired companies, what are some of the experiences that you've had in terms of what are some of the low-hanging fruits versus those that are a little more challenging when it comes to integrating an acquisition into the acquiring company?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. M&A is one of those areas that, is pretty expansive as far as it, relates to one, what's the value proposition, right? What's the nature? What's the intent of the actual acquisition, right? Is it a business combination? Is it an asset purchase, right? Like, what are you actually buying, right? And then it comes down to, what is the accounting and how will it affect the financial, right? When you're actually going and wanting to set it up. So the first thing that I would encourage, of course, is, and, obviously make sure it's the right strategic fit, right? Do the proper due diligence, right? And ensure that, you look at, is it a proper cultural fit? Is it vertical or is it horizontal to the business, right? What are the synergies that you're going to get from acquiring this thing? Because of course there's many deals that have gone south for many folks, right? So being able to, acquire and continue to operate, right, are one of the biggest fact patterns for success in any deal, right? Because obviously there's going to be, acquired headcount, and then there'll be acquired customers, and you just want to make sure that they want to continue to stay with your brand as soon as you acquire them. But assuming all that was successful, right, you got to the stage where then you're thinking about, what are the accounting implications of doing that, right? You're gonna have a handful of decisions that you need to make. One is, what level of investment are you making into it, right? Is it a cost investment? Is it Is it a equity investment, right? Is it a, is it a VIE, or is it, non-controlling interest, or is it fully controlling interest, right? They have multiple accounting implications, and all of that has different, FASB guidance for each one as to how to be able to integrate it. So it's important to understand, what the percentage of investment that will be, right? A cost investment 0 to 20, generally. Equity 20 to 50, joint venture 50, and then, non-controlling less than 100 and controlling 100, just for the listeners out there, right? And, to really bring that home, ultimately, it's where do you want it to show up in your financials as well, right? So it's a collaboration with the corp dev teams and the M&A group to know what the impact of it's going to be, right? Because if the goal, right, like, like Microsoft and these bigger companies are like serial acquirers, right? But many of them are small. There's only a few times you hear about, you know, companies wanting to acquire somebody like an Activision, right? Like, it's a big deal that was announced in the market, and all of, they want it to go through, and, it's a lot to absorb. But there's many acquisitions that are much smaller, call it 2 million, 5 million, 15 million, right? That nobody ever hears about because they're just tiny and they absorb them and it's not material to anybody, right? So when you pick up all of those details, the real intent is, what are you trying to do with that acquisition? Right? If you acquire 100% of it, you acquire all their financials, whether they're good or whether they're bad. And you have all the fair valuing that you need to do as behind it, right? Of all of the, what are the intangible assets or the fixed assets, because you pick up the net working capital, but you also have to bring over all of the fair value of all of the additional assets, like exclusive contracts and licensing rights. You have to look at all those components. So it's a big exercise to undertake. But if in the end, you go through the exercise, you find out what the right fit for you is, right? And you want to continue to acquire, I think then the biggest factor, right, is just going to be the alignment that you need to be able to strategize, the absorption, right? And be able to integrate. And the biggest factor of integration is going to be, do you have a coordinated project plan to be able to execute on all these activities, right? Because, if one group doesn't pull their weight, then you're going to end up in a situation where, you didn't integrate it properly, right? Then you have communication challenges. The business doesn't operate as efficiently as it was pre-acquisition. So then, you have challenges on, integration. You have, it just, the challenges just continue to go up if you don't have a dedicated effort to absorb it once buying it. So it's one thing to be able to come up with a strategy. It's another thing to come up with what the accounting fit's going to be. But the third part is, did you successfully integrate and notify everyone that's going to be on that? And then, getting that execution. So you can basically you get the accretive acquisition that benefits the bottom line and a return to shareholders. So if it's all done successfully, it's very, very rewarding to a business. But if not, it can be, very harmful at the same time. Honda, Mitsubishi, and, Nissan with a three-way merger. I'm interested to see I'd love to see the transaction details on that one, right? The Honda GTR, we'll see. I don't know if
That's a great example, for sure. Plus, yeah, Honda's got all kinds of great engines too. But on M&A, if you were to distill kind of one of your key learnings on what is a key success factor in making a acquisition successful, how would you describe it?
dedication and no sleep. I joke a little bit, but ultimately, I think it takes significant drive over a period of time to deliver on all the fact that, that the company will want to achieve.
Yeah, no, understood. Eric, we're just about right at time. I want to thank you very much for sharing your experience and knowledge of accounting and finance as it is related to your career. Are there any final words that you'd like to impart to our listeners who vary from students all the way to professionals that follow 8x8?
Absolutely. Maybe two thoughts. One, AI is not here to take jobs; it's here to enhance them. Right. So just learn the technology, figure out how to use it, and it'll benefit society as a whole and any company that you're working for. And as far as like 8x8 is concerned, It's definitely a bundled platform, definitely very effective and useful, uses AI. So, I would just go to our website, contact the sales team if you're interested, and, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to give you a demo.
Nice plug for 8x8. That's excellent. I agree. If you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. And if you have any other comments, please send me any notes or email comments. And otherwise, as I always say, stay transparent.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your time. Talk to you again soon.
Thanks so very much. Bye, Nor.
Bye-bye.